Hey everyone, and welcome to Talk ETFs, ETF.com's weekly video series. My name is Sumit Roy, and I'm Senior Analyst here at ETF.com. This week, I'm speaking with Patti, who's the CEO of VistaShares. Adam, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So, Adam, obviously, you've been in the ETF industry for a very long time. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up starting VistaShares?
Sure, I've been in the ETF industry going back to 2001, believe it or not. When I worked at Time Inc. running Fortune indexes, we launched an ETF with State Street Global Advisors called the Fortune 500 ETF back then. So it was really early on. Fast forward, I started a company called Index IQ in 2006. We focused on liquid alternatives and hedge fund replication strategies and other alts. Ended up building that up and sold it to New York Life back in 2015. And then I stuck around at New York Life for a few years and helped them roll out ETFs globally across their platform. And then I was out and looking for a way back in. I missed the industry.
Amazing, amazing. And now you have VistaShares, of course, Adam, which I want to talk about. Your first ETF actually launched in December. It's actually an AI ETF. It's called the Artificial Intelligence Supercycle ETF with the ticker symbol AIS. Why did you decide to launch this one as your first ETF?
So I had the pleasure of meeting a gentleman named John McNeil, who became my partner in VistaShares. John was the former president of Tesla, the chief operating officer at Lyft. He's on the board of General Motors. He's very well known in tech circles, a thought leader in autonomous vehicles and in AI. And frankly, the methodology behind AIS and a few of other super cycle products that we'll be bringing out come from him and his research team over at DVX Ventures. So what he did is, he was looking for an efficient way to gain true exposure to the AI, what he deems the super cycle. And what a super cycle is kind of the biggest disruptive technological themes, really disrupting industries around the world. And he's identified four that are most important. One is AI, second is electrification, biotech, and robotics. So when he was looking for a way to access AI exposure, he looked at the ETFs and funds in the market, and no surprise, you look in the portfolios of those products, and you find that, their top 10 holdings are, Facebook or Meta, Google, Apple, Nvidia, and Nvidia for sure, Netflix, and the companies that most investors already own, either in the queues or in other funds or in their single stock portfolios. And you're not really getting AI exposure through those companies. So he came up with a concept called bill of materials, where we look at this, we analyze the supply chain in the AI space, try to determine what is the bill of materials for the infrastructure that goes into building out the AI supercycle. And if you look at it, we've got there are two important components. One is data centers, and the other is semiconductors. So then the trick is to really dig in to understand what goes into building a high performance AI data center, and the same on the semiconductor side. We don't want to load a portfolio up with of semiconductor companies necessarily. We want the companies that go into building the NVIDIA chips. Similarly, on the data center side, we're not interested in buying the data center companies. We want the companies that go into building the data centers, the picks and shovels, the cooling systems, the racking, the fiber optic cable, things like that. And these are companies that investors don't really have exposure to in most other funds. They're kind of the hidden gems in the marketplace.
And your timing couldn't have been better, Adam, because just a few days ago, we got the announcement that the Stargate project was launching. $500 billion is going to be invested in AI infrastructure by OpenAI, SoftBank, and some others. Do you think that's going to be a driver of this super cycle? I know there's been some drama surrounding whether that 500 billion is really going to come to fruition. Elon and Sam have kind of been arguing on Twitter about that. But it seems to me that regardless of Stargate, AI infrastructure spending is going to be booming. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg came out this morning. He said they're going to be spending 60 to 65 billion on capex. What's your take?
I agree. I mean, the 500 billion that was announced, I mean, put aside the quibbling here and there, it's a massive amount of investment going into the space. I saw the news about Meta this morning. Just a couple of weeks ago, Microsoft came out with an $80 billion commitment for data centers and infrastructure. I think we're at the tip of the iceberg. We're in the first inning of the AI supercycle right now. And all of this infrastructure is going into data centers and semiconductors. And, I'm using all loosely, of course, there's other ancillary areas, but the first step on the AI supercycle is to get the compute power ramped up. And that is through the semiconductors and the data centers. And AIS is the only way to play that in the ETF market.
And Adam, you mentioned other AI ETFs. They are more focused on, the stocks that you already see in QQQ or the S&P 500. So can you talk a little bit more about that? What's the portfolio look like for this ETF and how is it different than those competing ETFs?
Yeah, sure. So, and I don't want to take any shots at competitive funds, obviously. So I'll leave it to the investors to dig up the tickers and look at their top 10 holdings. But to your point, you open up the top 10 holdings of those funds and, it's Apple, Google, Amazon, and Netflix. I mean, sure, these companies are making investments into the AI space, but they are not AI plays. They are getting a very small piece of their revenue from the AI supercycle. And it's going to be a long time before AI is a meaningful part of their business. So for investors, what you really want is not necessarily the end consumer facing or the consumer applications that are coming down the pike, because that's down the pike. That's happening, 5, 10 years from now, 3 years from now, whatever it may be. It's the infrastructure that's required first to get to that end consumer experience. So, and that's what you're looking for. So, you look at our portfolio, we've got SK Hynix, we've got Taiwan Semiconductor, we've got Marvel Technology, we've got, Micron, Vertiv Holdings, which is the dominant player in data center cooling systems. So, I mean, it's a very different type of portfolio, and most likely investors have very little exposure to most of the companies in our portfolio. We have around 82 companies right now. The fund is structured as an active strategy. We're active to a rules-based process. So we have this bill of materials process that I described earlier on to identify the companies that are going into building data centers and semiconductors. That forms the basis of our portfolio with the 80 to 85 companies. But then we have an active overlay to manage risk and look for opportunities. And that active that investment committee is helmed by John McNeil, who I mentioned earlier. We have a gentleman named Sunny Madra, who is the president of a company called Grok, which is one of the leading players in the AI space. He's been in the AI space for many, many years and has built companies around that before. We've got Professor Robert Whitelaw, who is the former dean of the undergraduate college at Stern School of Business and NYU, and he was the chairman of the finance department there, and myself. So we have a very interesting way of managing the portfolio, looking at from a practitioner perspective with John and Sunny, looking around the world, looking for those opportunities and looking for those risks. And then, of course, from the portfolio construction perspective with Professor Whitelaw and myself.
That's great. So AIS certainly sounds like a very compelling ETF with a compelling strategy. You mentioned there being three other super cycles you're looking at. Are there ETFs tied to those already, or are you going to launch those in the future?
We have filed for an electrification ETF, which we will be bringing out at some point soon, and we'll have additional filings as we move forward.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to keep an eye out for those. Adam, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much.